The ocean breeze had a way of hiding secrets. It smelled like salt, sunscreen, and the faintest hint of betrayal. From her balcony overlooking Miami's turquoise waves, Eleanor West, 60, watched the palm trees sway like dancers in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The condo had been hers for decades. She had bought it with her own savings, worked hard, renovated it herself, and filled it with memories. Laughter from her grandchildren, quiet mornings with her late husband, parties for friends who became family. And now, Eleanor had a sinking feeling she couldn't ignore. Something was off. The routine phone calls from her daughter, Lila, had become overly cheerful, almost rehearsed. Invitations to brunch felt like inspections. Behind Lila's polite questions about Eleanor's health, Eleanor sensed a plan. Carefully wrapped, dangerously sweet. Eleanor had always been independent. She drove through Miami traffic, managed her finances, and handled her condo with the precision of someone who had fought for everything she owned. But Lila had changed over the last few years. She moved in and out of Eleanor's life like a tide, warm at first, then retreating without explanation. Don't skip this story. Hit like and subscribe because the events that follow will shock you. Started subtly. Lila visited more often than usual, asking strange questions about Eleanor's will. "Mom, have you thought about updating your condo ownership?" she'd ask, twirling her hair nervously. Eleanor laughed it off, thinking it was generational difference. Then one afternoon a letter arrived. Official looking, with the seal of a law firm Eleanor had never heard of. Her hands trembled as she read it. The words hit like a thunderclap. Due to concerns regarding mental capacity, it has been recommended that Eleanor West be placed under guardianship. Her heart raced. She reread it. The document implied that Lila had petitioned for control over her mother's affairs, including the condo Eleanor loved. Eleanor's mind spun. How could her own daughter do this? She thought of weekends spent together, birthdays celebrated, secrets shared. Had it all been a performance? The next day, Lila visited with a gift basket filled with tropical fruit and lotions. "I just want what's best for you, Mom," she said softly, smiling in a way that no longer reached her eyes. Eleanor's stomach twisted. From that moment on, Eleanor's world shifted. She was evaluated by strangers in crisp suits, doctors and social workers who seemed to accept Lila's story without question. Eleanor, who had managed her life with clarity, felt like a character in someone else's novel. If you think Eleanor will stay quiet, think again. Even as she was told she would be relocating to a high-rise assisted living facility, ironically with ocean views just blocks away from her condo, she started noticing inconsistencies. Staff were overly attentive, asking questions that didn't match reality. Lila's visits became less frequent once legal paperwork was underway. Eleanor had to be careful. Anger could be interpreted as confusion. She had to be patient, smart, and vigilant. Every phone call, every meeting, every glance became a clue. She began recording conversations subtly. Not out of paranoia, but because instinct told her words could be traps, and truth was her only weapon. She found receipts, emails, and small discrepancies. Lila had been planning this for months, if not years. Make sure to subscribe and hit like because the next part uncovers the first shocking betrayals, and trust me, it will keep your heart racing. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor adjusted to her new environment. The assisted living facility was beautiful, with large windows showing the Atlantic. But beauty was hollow. Each wave reminded her of what she had lost: trust. Yet in quiet moments she realized something important. She still had her mind, her instincts, and her resilience. Lila might have had lawyers and paperwork, but Eleanor had patience, strategy, and determination, enough to reclaim not just her condo, but her dignity. She also noticed small opportunities. Staff were distracted, procedures inefficient. These weren't mistakes. They were chances, tools for the careful plan she would hatch. And that, viewers, is where suspense begins. Every story of betrayal is also a story of observation, strategy, and quiet revenge. Eleanor's mind began to work like a chessboard, plotting, waiting for the right moment. The first inkling came quietly. Eleanor had been sifting through old documents in her condo before the move. Letters, receipts, and the meticulous notes she'd kept for decades. She liked to stay organized. It had been a habit, a form of control in a life she'd lived independently. But this time something felt off. A few emails caught her eye. Messages between Lila and a lawyer Eleanor had never hired. The subject line read, "Next steps, guardianship filing." Eleanor's hands shook as she opened the messages. Lila's words were careful, calculating. She wrote about Eleanor's mental capacity, as if she were discussing a patient she didn't truly know, not her mother. Eleanor's heart pounded. How long had this been going on? How many people had been fooled into believing her daughter's story? Then she noticed the paperwork Lila had left on the kitchen counter, the evaluation report that claimed Eleanor was unfit to manage her finances. Eleanor skimmed it, frowning. Half of the statements were exaggerated. Some were outright lies. She felt a sharp pang of betrayal. This was not just a legal maneuver. It was a deliberate attempt to erase her independence. You don't want to miss this next part. If you haven't already, hit like and subscribe because what Eleanor discovers will shock you. The betrayal deepened when Eleanor called her bank to check her accounts. She had a hunch Lila might have accessed information she shouldn't. "Hello, Mrs. West," said the teller, a young woman with a polite smile. "I wanted to confirm a recent change to my account permissions," Eleanor said. "Ah, yes," the teller replied slowly. "We have a request here to allow your daughter full access to your accounts." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She had not authorized this. And yet, Lila had moved so quietly, so cleverly, that no one had questioned the paperwork. It wasn't just money. Eleanor checked her condo records and discovered something even worse. Lila had filed documents with the county suggesting Eleanor was incapacitated, a claim that could legally justify transferring ownership of the condo without her consent. Every precaution she'd taken, every lock, every signature, was being undermined by her own daughter. Eleanor sank into the chair by the window, staring at the turquoise waves below. Miami had always felt like a sanctuary, but now every glint of sunlight on the water reminded her of Lila's betrayal. She thought about the life she had built, the late-night renovations, the friends who had become family, the memories held within these walls. And it was being stolen, not by a stranger, not by an enemy, but by her own flesh and blood. Step 3. Legal leverage. Eleanor began researching guardianship laws, property rights, and elder protections in Florida. She reached out discreetly to lawyers not to complain, but to ask questions about how Lila could be held accountable for misrepresentation and fraud. Step 4. Public perception. Eleanor realized that Miami's community was small, interconnected. Reputation mattered. If Lila's actions were exposed in a factual, calm manner, through verified documents, public opinion could act as a catalyst. People would see the betrayal, and Lila would have to answer. Step 5. Timing. Eleanor knew the law moved slowly. Patience would be her ally. Lila might think she had won already, but Eleanor's revenge would be like a tide, quiet at first, then overwhelming. With every passing day, Eleanor's confidence grew. She practiced speaking calmly, measured, articulate, the perfect persona for anyone evaluating her mental capacity. She wasn't just a victim, she was a strategist. She also began subtle reconnaissance, visiting the condo under the guise of checking personal belongings before Lila could fully claim control. She noted security camera positions, maintenance schedules, and neighbors who could corroborate her independence. At night, Eleanor would sit by her balcony window, the Miami skyline glowing in soft oranges and pinks, and imagine the moment when Lila's smugness would meet undeniable evidence. The thought brought a faint smile. Justice didn't need theatrics. It needed precision. "I'll let the truth speak," Eleanor whispered, "and it will be louder than any lie she ever told." Even the most calculated plans came with emotional cost. Eleanor had to balance rage with patience, grief with cunning. She allowed herself moments of sadness, remembering birthdays, laughter, and her late husband's advice. When wronged, fight with your mind first. Eleanor also faced doubts. Could she really outmaneuver her own daughter? Was this going too far? Each night, she wrestled with fear and hope, letting them sharpen her focus instead of dulling it. She reminded herself of one truth. Lila's betrayal was not just about property. It was about respect, dignity, and recognition. Eleanor would reclaim all three. Weeks turned into months. Eleanor had compiled her evidence, established contacts with attorneys, and learned the legal intricacies necessary to fight back. Her mind was a weapon, honed to perfection. Lila, meanwhile, remained oblivious, confident in her supposed victory. Eleanor smiled quietly as she poured herself a cup of coffee one morning, gazing at the Atlantic waves. Soon, she thought, the tide will turn. And viewers, this is where suspense builds. Eleanor's planning is complete. The next chapter will reveal the shocking and clever ways she executes her revenge, leaving Lila reeling and the audience gasping. So, subscribe and hit like because the upcoming part is intense, emotional, and full of twists you won't see coming. The first step was subtle. Eleanor had spent months building a foundation, documenting Lila's deceit, gathering proof, and quietly observing weaknesses. Now she would use everything she had learned. It started with the condo inspections. Lila had assumed she could control access, but Eleanor, ever cautious, had secured copies of all keys and alarm codes before the legal guardianship claim was filed. She scheduled a routine check with the maintenance team, explaining she wanted to ensure everything was in order before leaving for the assisted living facility. Lila had no idea. As Eleanor walked through her condo, she noted small but crucial details. Broken locks, faded security cameras, mismanaged paperwork left by Lila's helpers. Every flaw would be critical later. Eleanor smiled quietly. The tiny cracks in Lila's plan were already forming a pattern she could exploit. Next came the lawyer confrontation. Eleanor scheduled a meeting under the guise of seeking advice about assisted living arrangements. She arrived with a small stack of printed emails, notarized statements, and financial records. "I just want to make sure everything is in order," Eleanor said calmly, placing the documents on the desk. The lawyer, initially polite but dismissive, began reviewing the files. Eyes widened as Eleanor laid out the evidence. Lila's unauthorized bank access, forged signatures, and misleading guardianship filings. "You see," Eleanor said, her voice steady, "my daughter is trying to take control of my property and finances under false pretenses. I am fully capable of managing my affairs." The lawyer's expression shifted from polite patience to alarm. "Mrs. West, these are serious allegations," he said, flipping through the papers. "This is actionable." It was the first of many dominoes to fall. Lila's plan had counted on complacency, on assumptions that Eleanor was weak or uninformed. But Eleanor was neither. Eleanor also understood the power of perception. She reached out to her neighbors and community members, discreetly sharing verified facts about her autonomy and the attempts to manipulate her. A few supportive neighbors agreed to act as witnesses if needed, confirming that Eleanor was sharp, independent, and fully capable of managing her condo. Lila, who had always underestimated the attention Eleanor could command, had no idea that the social network around her mother could turn into a legal and moral shield. "You see, Mom," Lila said during a rare visit, attempting to charm her with a smile, "I'm just trying to make sure everything is safe for you." Eleanor's lips curled into a subtle smile. "Safety isn't your concern, Lila. Integrity is." And integrity cannot be stolen by lies. Eleanor's next move was psychological. She began letting small hints slip, carefully worded statements to Lila's friends, mentions of legal consultations, and casual references to witnesses who had observed Lila's actions. Lila, ever confident in her victory, initially dismissed the warnings. But the seeds of doubt were planted. One evening, Eleanor invited a trusted neighbor to the assisted living facility under the pretext of a casual visit. As they walked, Eleanor subtly pointed out the documents, correspondences, and schedules Lila had manipulated. The neighbor listened quietly, then nodded in understanding. "You've been very clever," the neighbor said. "Not many people could pull this off." Eleanor's eyes sparkled. Cleverness and patience. That was her real weapon. With her evidence compiled, Eleanor worked with her lawyer to file a formal objection to the guardianship, presenting indisputable proof of her mental competence. The case moved swiftly. Lila, caught off guard, could not counter the meticulous records Eleanor had gathered. Court dates arrived, and Eleanor appeared composed, articulate, and poised. Each piece of evidence was presented with clarity. Every witness corroborated her independence. Lila's arrogance began to crumble under scrutiny, a slow, almost visible collapse in confidence as her own lies were exposed. "Your Honor," Eleanor said in court, voice firm yet calm, "I am fully capable of managing my affairs. Any claims to the contrary are false and have been fabricated for personal gain." The courtroom was silent. Lila's lips pressed into a tight line, realizing that her mother had turned the tables, and there was no escape. Eleanor didn't stop at the courtroom. She arranged for a community meeting at the condo association, sharing her story calmly, factually, and with evidence. Neighbors who had once casually trusted Lila's charm now saw the truth. Lila's attempts at manipulation were exposed in a way that no amount of charm could hide. Eleanor didn't shout. She didn't dramatize. She simply laid out the truth. And the effect was devastating. By the time the final legal ruling came, Eleanor had achieved complete vindication. The court formally acknowledged her mental competence, nullified any claim Lila had to the condo, and warned that any future attempts to manipulate her property could carry severe legal consequences. Lila sat quietly during the announcement, stunned. Her overconfidence, her assumption that her mother was powerless, had been shattered by strategy, patience, and intelligence. I didn't think you'd handle it like this," Lila whispered, a trace of fear in her voice. Eleanor, standing tall and composed, simply smiled. "I never doubted myself. I only doubted your honesty." After the legal battles, Eleanor returned to her condo, walking through rooms filled with memories. Each step was symbolic, a reclaiming of space, dignity, and life. She placed the small carved wooden figure of a woman holding a lantern on the mantel, a reminder of her resilience and the quiet power of patience and strategy. She allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction, not vengeance through anger, but victory through intelligence. Lila's arrogance had been her undoing. Eleanor's careful, calm, and calculated moves had won the day, legally, socially, and morally. Eleanor's revenge was not dramatic in the sense of shouting or confrontation. It was precise, elegant, and inevitable. Every move was backed by evidence. Every action was measured. And every moment of doubt Eleanor had experienced was transformed into clarity and strength. She had proven one timeless lesson. Betrayal may wound the heart, but patience, intelligence, and resilience can turn any storm into a triumph. The Miami sun shone through Eleanor's condo windows like a promise kept. She walked through each room slowly, absorbing the scent of the ocean, the warmth of the sun, and the quiet strength that now filled the space. This condo was more than property. It was a testament to a life she had built, fought for, and protected. Lila had been defeated, not through rage, but through intelligence, patience, and calm determination. The court had formally recognized Eleanor's competence, and any claims her daughter might attempt in the future were legally nullified. But victory, Eleanor realized, was more than legal. It was emotional. She sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee, the Atlantic waves stretching endlessly before her, and let herself reflect. "It's not about the condo," she whispered to herself. "It's about respect. It's about truth." Eleanor's days now carried a new rhythm. She began reconnecting with friends and neighbors who had stood by her, finding joy in small gatherings and long walks along the beach. Miami's vibrant life felt different. Brighter, freer. Every conversation, every shared laugh, was a reminder that resilience and integrity always shine through, no matter how deep the betrayal. As for Lila, the experience left her stunned and humbled. She had underestimated her mother, assumed victory too early, and relied on manipulation and deceit. Now she faced the consequences not just legally but socially. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired her cunning now looked at her with quiet disappointment. One afternoon Lila called Eleanor. There was a pause, a hesitation Eleanor had never heard before. "Mom, I realize I was wrong," Lila said softly. Eleanor looked out at the waves, her expression calm but firm. She didn't need to yell or lecture. Words could not undo years of cunning. Instead, she simply replied, "Actions speak louder than words, Lila. Learn from this. Respect isn't given. It's earned." The line went quiet. Eleanor smiled faintly. That was all the lesson Lila needed, if she chose to learn it. For Eleanor, the journey had been transformative. Betrayal had tested her, but it also reminded her of her own power. She had learned that true revenge is not about anger or destruction. It is about strategy, evidence, and patience. It is about letting the truth shine so brightly that deception cannot survive. To anyone watching this story, especially those who may have faced betrayal by someone they loved, remember Eleanor's example. Observe carefully. Notice inconsistencies, lies, and manipulations. Document everything. Evidence is the most powerful shield. Stay calm and strategic. Patience and intelligence can overcome even the most calculated betrayals. Let truth and integrity be your weapon. The satisfaction of winning honorably surpasses any impulsive revenge. Eleanor stood on her balcony one last time that evening, watching the sun sink into the Atlantic horizon. The water sparkled, the waves whispered, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom. She breathed deeply, feeling lighter than she had in months. She had reclaimed her life, her home, and her dignity. Lila had learned a harsh lesson. And Eleanor had discovered something else entirely. Strength comes not from fury, but from clarity and courage. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that resilience, intelligence, and patience are stronger than any betrayal. Life may test you. Loved ones may deceive you. But as Eleanor's story shows, the quiet, thoughtful, and strategic heart always prevails. Her condo, her life, her peace, all were intact. And as the waves crashed against the shore below, Eleanor smiled, knowing she had won in every way that truly mattered.